There's an individual who just died. I'm gonna talk about him on here because this is an example of somebody who didn't agree with me on much. Somebody, especially in the last 5-10 years of life, didn't agree with me on very much. But he was an essential part of the Free Assange movement in New York City. And he died. He died a couple months ago, I believe. And I want to tell you about this person because there's one thing that I heard when I was in Russia. And I heard it at the World Youth Festival planning meeting. And I heard it from a Russian government person. And they talked about how during the Second World War, what was made clear is that ordinary people could be heroes. Ordinary people could be heroes just by defending their community from the Nazi invaders. And that's what the Second World War showed. And that's also what was shown by socialist realist art. Right? Socialist realist art. You have the statue of the factory worker. You have the statue of the woman feeding the chickens. You have the painting of the common soldier. That social realist art was about how ordinary people can be heroes. This was an ordinary man who was a hero. And he didn't agree with me on very much. Didn't agree with me on a lot. But this was an ordinary man who was a hero. And in particular because of the Assange case. This man was named Marty Goodman. Marty Goodman, he was a transit worker in New York City. He drove a subway train in New York City for a living. And he was a communist. He was a Trotskyist. He grew up in a Communist Party USA family, but he joined the Socialist Workers' Party, was involved in anti-Vietnam War protests during the 1980s. He left the Socialist Workers' Party. He was in a really tiny Trotskyist group called Socialist Action for many years. And I met Marty Goodman years ago because he was involved in anti-war protests. And he was a very nice man. He wasn't very tall. He had a thick accent. He used to talk like this. And Marty didn't agree with me on a lot. You know, I'm a hardline Marxist-Leninist. I defend the Soviet Union and Stalin. He was a Trotskyist. And there was a lot of drama in his organization related to Alexander Dugin and all kinds of stuff. But Marty made it his commitment in his final years of life to organize the Free Assange protests of New York City. And long after that became a trendy thing to do, long after the cancel culture got going and Julian Assange was called an anti-Semite and a Trump supporter and all this stuff, Marty kept doing it. And he organized protests where Roger Waters and Chris Hedges and Max Blumenthal spoke. And he would always call me on the phone before those rallies. Hey, Caleb. Hey, you remember me? This is Marty Goodman. We're going to have a rally to free Assange. Sometimes I went to the rallies to free Assange, and there'd be 5 people there. 5 people. And one of them was Marty. No, I am being dead honest with you all. There was a day where he called me, Caleb, we're having a rally to free Julian Assange. It's outside the British consulate or whatever. And I went there and there were 5 people there. There were 5 people at the rally. And one of them was Marty. Marty knew that Julian Assange was right. And he was a Trotskyist and he was a transit worker and he was a lot of different things. And he knew that Julian Assange was right. And as he got older, he was retired, as he had a falling out with different anti-war groups, as lifelong friends, he just decided, I am going to support Julian Assange. Week after week and month after month, I was getting calls from Marty Goodman. Caleb, we're having a rally for Julian Assange. And I mean, this was his obituary. He died. He died back in March, 74 years old, transit worker. And if it wasn't for the fact that there were millions of people all over the world like Marty, millions of unsung heroes like Marty Goodman, some of them were libertarians, some of them were Trump supporters, QAnon people, some of them were communists, Trotskyites like Marty Goodman, Stalinists like Jyoti Brar, Maoists, some of them were anarchists, some of them were punk rockers, some of them were white, some of them were black, some of them were Asian, some of them were Latino, some of them were Arab Americans. It wasn't for the fact that there were so many people from so many different backgrounds who knew what was right and knew that they would never abandon Julian Assange, Julian would still be locked up today. The reason that Julian Assange is on his way back to Australia is because of people like Marty Goodman. With all due respect to Roger Waters and Chris Hedges and, celebrities, it's great when you get a celebrity endorsement, but those celebrities, they weren't the people that organized those rallies. They weren't the people that were there when there was 5 people out in front of the embassy. Marty was there. The American Revolution, they used to talk about winter soldiers and summer soldiers. Now, during the American Revolution, there were some people that were with George Washington. They were with the American Revolution in the summertime. But once it got cold, they were out of there. But there were some people in the American Revolution they called the winter soldiers. And those were the guys that were there all year long. And they weren't just fighting when it was warm. They were fighting when it was freezing cold in the mountains in Valley Forge. And the reason that Julian Assange is on his way back to Australia is not because of the summer soldiers. It's because of the winter soldiers. It's because of the people who never backed down from supporting Julian Assange. It's because of the people who made it their issue. It's because of the people who made it clear that they weren't going to budge on Julian Assange. They were going to work with anybody who could be worked with on the issue of Julian Assange. It's because of people like Marty Goodman. It's because of ordinary people, an ordinary transit worker who happened to be in a tiny little communist group. Every time I'd see him, I'd buy a copy of his newspaper. He was physically quite short. He had a thick New York accent, and he supported Julian Assange. It's because of people like Marty Goodman that Julian Assange is free today. Roger Waters, other people, we appreciate their support. But in order to have a movement, you need people like Marty Goodman. You need people who just hang on and don't back down. That's what you need. And I wish people could understand that. When we talk about a movement isn't a Facebook like or share. A movement isn't an online petition that you sign. A movement isn't a YouTube live stream. A movement is people who are in this for the long haul. People that are willing to make sacrifices. People who are willing to take risks. People who are willing to take difficult stands. People who are calling you at midnight about a protest happening in a few days. Hey, Caleb, I know you're an RT reporter. Me and my friends, we're going to be in front of the British embassy. We're going to be supporting Assange. Can you be there? Can you be there? That was Marty. And there were big rallies for Assange too, and he was at those rallies as well. There were rallies with thousands of people for Assange. He was there as well. But he became an Assange guy in his final years of life. He decided he was going to be an Assange guy, and he didn't care. He didn't care what anyone had to say. He didn't care if the people he was walking with were Republicans or libertarians. He didn't care if Julian Assange tweeted something anti-Semitic. He didn't care if Julian Assange was accused of blah, blah, blah. He didn't care about Trump, blah, blah, blah. He didn't care about Biden or Clinton, blah, blah, blah. He supported Julian Assange. And he made that his issue. And that is why Julian Assange is free today. I want you all to understand that. That's why Julian Assange is free. Julian Assange is free because of people like Marty Goodman. People who made the movement their life. People who stood on principle. And Marty Goodman, to Marty Goodman's credit, he was a Trotskyite, but he was always friendly to me. And every time he saw me, he'd say, Caleb, how's it going? And there were a lot of people that I was a leftist activist with in the time when I met him who wouldn't speak to me, who wouldn't talk to me. My name has I'm just hated in communist and leftist circles, and especially among Trotskyites, and especially among the so-called liberal left. Not Marty. I saw Marty Goodman at the 50th anniversary of MLK Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech. He told me he'd been at the original. Much respect. Wow. You knew him too, huh? This is a hero right here. And the reason that Julian Assange is free is because it wasn't just Marty. There were people in Britain and people in Australia and people in America, people all across America, people all across Europe who did what Marty did. They made Assange their cause, and they didn't back down. And that is what I want you all to understand. These kinds of people are what make movements happen. Not the Vosches, not the ContraPoints, not the Bernie Sanders. It's the Marty Goodmans. And I wish I could get people to understand that. Some people are in this for real.